welcome to the part 2 of the series of my private rants, which I do on my own, in English, in which I will try to improve the sound quality and I will try to be much less noisy in the background, which was really annoying in the first one. So, the thing today, as you've probably gathered from the title of the video, is education. And I mostly mean primary education. For some context, I'm working in the primary education myself. I am teaching English to a lot of kids in Russia. And I'm very concerned for the state in which the primary education is in the world in general. Because from what I've seen, while the education in the West and in Russia is vastly different, obviously, there are some commonalities which are hurting kids one way or another. And this is what I want to talk about here. So, let's start from the beginning, obviously. What do we teach our kids first? What is the first thing we teach kids? Obviously, it is language. And after they have gathered up enough language from their parents, we start teaching them language in more structured fashion. We start teaching them more words, like in kindergartens and stuff. We start teaching them how to express themselves, how to read, how to write, and so on and so forth. This is the stage at which hardly anything can be changed, obviously. Because until one masters language, one doesn't possess how to put it. It's kind of difficult to put into words. They don't possess their entire mind, so to speak. What do I mean by that? While you don't know at least one language to a certain degree, to a degree where you can freely express yourself in it, your mind is not complete because you cannot formulate your own thoughts with words. And obviously there are cases of people who cannot ever talk or write, but we won't go too far into that because this is not the topic. So what I'm saying, this is a formative moment of the mind. So once a child knows one language, his native language, well enough, and is able to speak, write, and read in it, his mind has finally completely formed. So what do we do at that point? And the answer is, I think, very similar in most countries. We sit our kids down in school and start stuffing them with information. We simply put them in classes, and then we give them teachers who are just trying to shove as much information as they can into their heads. And here's where the problem lies. And from what I have seen in my, so to speak, career, it wasn't much of a career. I was mostly in one place all the time. But what have I gathered from my time as an educator is that, it's pointless. That's what I have gathered. I mean, it's not entirely pointless, of course, but I think it's extremely inefficient and crude. And it's an extremely stupid way to handle this very important point in primary education when the child just fully completed the formation of their mind as a whole and now is going to start using it, but instead of teaching them how to use it, we, for whatever reason, just continue to stuff them with information. We just give them more words to learn. We give them more we give them more information about nature, about stuff, and the only subject that we don't get wrong at that point is actually math. And why that is, I'm going to explain a little bit later. So I feel like the primary education in general is extremely backwards. We are not teaching the kids what we need to teach them. And what we need to teach them is a way to think. That is the most important point of the primary education. At least it should be, but in practice it often isn't. I haven't witnessed many teachers who actually pay attention to learning their kids to think, to find connections. You know, there was one example of a girl that I was teaching, and it was really like enlightening to me that we really have this thing as backwards. Because, you know, I asked her, so here are two words, and you know how they're translated. So the two words were silly boy, and she says, yeah, silly boy means like stupid, uh, means an idiot or something like that. Well, she didn't use the word idiot, of course, but the point is she understands what the word is. She understands that it means someone stupid. So I ask her, do you know what boy means? And she says, yes, the boy means a little man, a small man, you know? And I ask her, so you know the overall meaning, and you know the meaning of one word. Can you derive the meaning of the second word? And what do I get in response? I get a blank stare. She doesn't understand it. It is such a basic thing. It is the most basic logic imaginable. We have two things. We know the meaning of one. We know the overall meaning of the whole composition of the two things. And we need to derive what the other one is. It is one of the most basic logical tools one can imagine doing this sort of thing. And she couldn't do it. And she was like, she's like 9 years old. So it wasn't like she was just not understanding the meaning of words or something, or she was just like being confused by the whole situation. No, she was there, she was trying to think, but she couldn't. Nobody taught her. So I had to do it. So I explained to her how it is done. It is very simple. You know, we have the whole overall meaning. So if we subtract the meaning of one word, we get the meaning of another. And she could have, I know a lot of people will say like, oh, that is a little bit too complex for her or whatever, that like she might not know what an adjective is and stuff like that, but she could have at least made an educated guess. She could have guessed what that word meant, but she didn't do it. She completely blanked out. She didn't have an idea of what I wanted from her. And that is exactly the problem with the modern primary education. We don't teach our kids the ways of thinking. We simply stuff them with endless flow of information. And remember how I said why the math is the only subject that has it right? And guess why? Because math is literally the way of thinking. It doesn't have any information. Math is an extremely abstract discipline. You need to understand how addition works, how subtraction works, how multiplication works, all that sorts of things. You need to understand it. You cannot just simply memorize it, like you can words of English or of your own language. So math does in part that job that the whole education system should do. But unfortunately, a lot of math teachers are not also doing that job really well, because they prefer to simply make kids memorize how this works, that works, to make them, like, the most idiotic thing I think in the Russian system of education is that you're made to memorize the multiplication table, which is like each number from 1 to 10 multiplied by another number from 1 to 10, and it's all in the table, and you're made to memorize it. Why are you made to memorize it? You should simply understand how multiplication works, and then you don't need to memorize it. And that was exactly what I did when I was a kid. I happened to have my grandpa around, who was he's still around, and he's a physics professor. And he explained how multiplication worked to me, because the math teacher at school didn't do that. And once I understood it, I didn't need to memorize it anymore. I could just think for about like 10 seconds and know the answer for any of those examples in that table. And, so none of the subjects in the primary school are doing the job they need to do. Even the one that sometimes steps in, and still a lot of the time it fails. And it is just mind-boggling to me that this is happening right now, because we have been talking so much about education, about the fact that we need to modernize it, to make it more interesting for kids, and all of this time we were missing the most key point of it all. We were missing the most important thing. that we just don't teach our kids ways of thinking. We do not teach our kids logic. And this is what we need to teach them, logic. Just as simple as that. We need to start from the very point when they can even grasp what it is. From like, I personally think they can grasp it even at the very beginning of the primary school, if you apply it correctly, you know. It's extremely simple. Once, essentially, logic, as pretty much anything in this world, relies on math a lot. Because you need to know what it means to subtract, to add, and stuff like that, to exercise any form of logic. Because even in the example that I gave you with the girl and the silly boy phrase, it was basically what she needed to do was subtract, right? She needed to subtract one word from the equation. Of course, it wasn't done mathematically in that case. But if you just like, if you imagine that phrase in your mind, and it says silly boy, and then you subtract the word boy, you're left with silly, and you're left with its meaning. So, you know, you need to know those basic operations on a conceptual level. You need to understand they do not simply apply to numbers, they apply to everything in the world. And if you go from there, because this is the part of logic that is very easy to understand for kids, because, you know, they all know basic math at that point, because, you know, they all played with stakes and they all learn to count and stuff like that. So if you go from there, if you start from the very basics, if you start from drawing the simplest logical conclusions that you can draw, and if you start explaining to kids how it all works, slowly, very methodically, you don't need to hurry anywhere. I think you will achieve much greater results than if you do what our schools currently do and just stuff them with knowledge. It's pointless. They get the knowledge, they memorize it, and then it's wasted in their heads. They have it and they can't use it because they don't have the tools to use it. It's incredible, really, how nobody seems to pay any attention to this. That we teach our kids things that they can't use. They can't use the meaning of the words. They can't use math properly because they don't freaking understand how exactly all of it works. They only remember the examples they were given. A lot of the time. A lot of the time. Not all of the time, because if anybody is going to teach a kid a proper way of thinking, it would be a math teacher at primary school. If they're not slacking off and if they're not copping out. So, yeah. It's really amazing to me. So, that is my suggestion. Just start teaching. Start teaching logic in primary school. Right now, I don't know how it is in the West, to be honest, but I've never heard of logic being even like in high school. So I imagine it's pretty much like Russia in that regard, in that we only have logic as a discipline in university, which is retarded when you think about it. You've been gaining all of that knowledge all your life for no apparent reason, because you don't know why you need that knowledge, because you don't have logic, you don't have the tools to actually apply it to anything useful. And then suddenly starts teaching you that. It's just like, basically at that point, either you already figured it out yourself, or you will probably never figure it out, no matter how much they teach you. So, I mean, just like, get your act together. Realize that your system is ass backwards. Logic should be learned in primary school. You can leave a lot of the knowledge to universities, because universities are for people who actually want to know more. Well, school must give you the basic life skills that would allow you to gain knowledge, to use knowledge, and to actually be a functioning human being. And without logic, it's incredible. And anybody can learn logic. You know, all of those idiotic people that you encounter every day, if they were taught logic in school, I bet my freaking ass, even if they're absolute freaking morons with IQ 70, they would be functioning much better as human beings right now. Because they would have at least some basic understanding somewhere in the back of their minds of how things work, why they should do this or shouldn't do that, and all of the stuff like this. All of this. Yeah. I'm done. I'm done. I don't know why it is so bad. And it's so bad everywhere. I would understand it if it was bad somewhere. But I have not heard of a school system that actually implemented this idea. I haven't heard of it. If you've heard of any, let me know, because I would be so glad to hear about them, and I would be so glad to, like, to figure something out for my own lessons, because I'm trying to implement it. It's really hard on your own. I'm going to tell you that. It's really hard on your own, because I have to figure things out. I have to figure ways to learn. Oh my god. Figure ways to teach these kids. Make them learn. Teach them all of those connections, how logic works, how they can think in the right way to get the best results in whatever they're doing. That is what I'm trying to do, but it's incredibly hard. So if you've heard of any like school programs like that, or if you heard of any schools like that, please let me know. I would be really glad to hear about it, like genuinely. And yeah, I'm like, I can't get this idea out of my mind, because ever since it's kind of nestled in my head, I just keep thinking about it, of how awful it is, of what we are doing to our children, of why they're like growing up to be so uneducated, basically. After so much education, they just grow up to be uneducated, because they don't know how to use it all. They have heads full of knowledge, and these days they have all the knowledge in the world, and they don't know how to use it. That's tragic. That's really tragic. So yeah, share your thoughts in the comments if you want. I would be really glad to hear from anybody who watches this video. Any thoughts on this matter? And yeah, I will see you in my next rant. Goodbye.